Welcome to the Understanding Your Child session from Standing in the Gap. My name is Sam, I'm the Clinical Director. For those of you who've not come across us, Standing in the Gap is a child mental health charity, and we work with preschool and primary age children, helping them to manage big emotions of fear, anxiety, anger and grief. One of the questions parents often ask us is, why is it the little things that tip my children over the edge and cause the meltdowns? So we're going to be looking at that. We're going to be looking at what can we do to prevent meltdowns and what do we do if it happens. So that's the questions we're going to answer today. So we can explain why children lose it with our stress bucket. All of us have a stress bucket. The size of your bucket is going to depend on what's called your resilience. But as you notice, there's a tap about a third of the way down. The tap is not at the top, because actually we don't want too many things in our bucket filling us up, but it's not also at the bottom either. So we do need a little bit of stress, a little bit of stuff going on. The stress hormone is something called cortisol, and actually that helps us. It's a naturally based hormone that helps us get out of bed and keep moving. So we've got our buckets, and things go in our buckets. So there's big things and little things that go into our buckets. So some of the big things that go into our buckets can be moving house, having a new teacher, big changes, things like COVID-19 and lots of different adjustments to what's going on, homework, somebody being ill. For the big people in life, big things that fill their buckets can be jobs, money worries, your car breaking down, as broke down recently, massive stress, relationship difficulties, lots of different things that can come in and be big things. So that you've got your big things going into your bucket, and you also get little things. So little things can be forgetting somebody's name, can't remember how to do a maths thing, wrong hairband, can't find your shoes, you've lost your keys, you've made lumpy porridge, or you've burnt the tea. Not necessarily huge things, but what happens is your bucket fills up with big things and little things, and it's often the little things that just tip us over the edge and cause us to have that meltdown, whether we're a big person or whether we're a little person. So what can we do to prevent meltdowns? As I said, on the side of our bucket we have a tap. So what we need to do is work out how we open that tap and bring down the level of stress that we're feeling before we get the overwhelming meltdown bits. Everybody's different, every child is different, so different things are going to work for different people. And it's really important that you personalise this and actually identify what different bits work for different people. There's a worksheet that comes with this digital resource, so please download it with the taps on, fill it in for your big people and your little people, put it somewhere where you can see it, and start to think about actually how can we open our taps and release our stress levels. So some of the things that can help from a physical perspective, you can see our physical elves joining in here, going for a walk, going for a run, doing some dancing, bouncing on a trampoline, doing something completely different can be quite helpful. If you've got a child that's struggling with their feelings as well, doing some together side by side time can be really beneficial, much more effective than looking at them face to face. So that can be incorporated in a walk or something like that, having an opportunity to talk to them. Making sure you get enough sleep. This is a really key one. There are set amounts of sleep for different ages, but there's also variety within that. You know your child. Are they a lot of sleep or a little amount of sleep person? And if you get a change in that, often that can be one of the factors that actually causes meltdowns. Tickling is really useful. What we know is that tickling releases endorphins and actually can help lower the cortisol stress levels. So if your child is feeling a little bit stressed or a little bit concerned, giving them a good tickle every now and again can be really beneficial. For me, playing the saxophone is one of the things that opens my tap. I use a completely different part of my brain when I play the saxophone to when I do lots of other things that I do in life. So it's really nice and I really enjoy that. So on my list of things to do, that's definitely one of mine. Also worth considering watching a film, having a nice meal. Positive touch is really important. We are human beings and we need to relate and interact with other human beings. Now, depending on your type of child, some are very easy to cuddle and quite happy to have a cuddle. Others are a little bit more difficult to want to sit or do cuddles, particularly as they get older. One of the really good techniques you can use is something called a pizza massage. I'll show you how this works. This is my lovely assistant. Too complicated to get children involved, so Winnie the Pooh here needed less forms. So the idea with a pizza massage is that you can you do a positive touch while telling a story. So the aim is you can either sit a child on your knee, you can put them on a chair in front of you, or you can just do side by side on a sofa. It's very adaptable, or you can do it when they're laying in bed, so laying down and doing exactly the same thing. The idea is that you tell a story about a pizza. So as you're telling about this pizza, you make your pizza. So you make you knead it and you make the shape, and then you start putting on different ingredients. And the aim is that you put a different ingredient on with each different hand gesture. And you can have as much or as little time on this, and you can make it as sensible or as crackers as you feel you need to. You know, can you put ice cream on a pizza, or banana, or what about mushrooms, or what about this, what about that? Go through a whole range of different things you can put on. Make the pizza, enjoy the positive touch by using the different techniques and the different movements. It gives that real sensation and positive touch, which is really helpful. What you then do is you can then talk about cooking the pizza, closing the doors on the oven, closing the pizza down, rubbing it to make it work, and then delivering the pizza. Do a little bit of pretend play. If your child's lying down at the time, you can actually then put your blanket on and say the pizza needs to cook now, and they can go to sleep. It's a nice quick win of how to get some real positive touch into your kids in an easy way. One of the big things we need to think about as big people is it's really important that our buckets aren't too full. If our buckets are too full, then we can't help our children manage their buckets. Which is why on a plane, if you're ever in an emergency and the oxygen falls from the ceiling, the advice always is that the adult puts their mask on first and then helps their child. Because if they don't, the adult could pass out and then there'll be nobody to help the child. So when we're talking about stress buckets, it's a similar thing. As the big people, we need to look after ourselves. We need to make sure that we're looking for our emotions, opening our taps and doing different things. I know from my perspective, I'm always a worse parent when my bucket is very full. So we need to think about what things empty our buckets, how we can help each other. So do download the sheet, write it on, pop it on your fridge, remind yourself regularly, come back to it when you're having a few more meltdowns and a few more different things. Is it the big things? In which case we've got a whole load of different seminars and workshops and things that we run, or is it the little things? Because actually often it's the little things that do tip us over the edge, but it's all those things in there. So what do we do if we get a meltdown? We've all had them, we've all done them, and most of our children have also done them as well. So usually what I'd say is by the time you get into meltdown level, it's because things have become overwhelming. Your big things and your little things have filled your bucket and it's overflowed out of the top. What we need to try and do as the big person is see the bigger picture here. This isn't about the wrong hairband or the lost shoes or the lumpy porridge. It's actually about everything else. It's about all those things in there and the not opening the tap and it becoming overwhelming. So I think when you're in the middle of a meltdown, it's really important that you give the hug, the reassurance, the positives. It's okay, we can manage this. Try the empathy. I understand it's frustrating, you're cross, you're angry, you're annoyed, all of those. And just reassure. There's a really good analogy that we use when we're talking about kids and particularly teenagers and their brains, that their brain stem is like your hand. You've got your middle part of your brain, and when it becomes too overwhelming, what tends to happen is you literally flip your lid, which is when people lose the capacity and become overwhelmed. They flip their lid, and what happens is you move down to using the limbic part of your brain, which is your fight and flight part. This is the bit where you are literally responding and doing everything else. What I would say is if you're getting an overwhelming response, which is very limbic, that's not the time to have a discussion about feelings. It's about containing it. It's about sitting them down. It's about giving them a cuddle. It's about knowing your child, looking at some of the temperament work we've been doing. Do they need a hug or do they need a little bit of space? Once they've done that calming down and the rational part of their brain, the cortex is there, then you can have that conversation. You know, what's going on, what's happening. If I've burnt the tea and I'm really cross and I'm upset, I don't necessarily want logical explanations of you should have turned it down if you tried doing this. What I want is I want a hug. I want some reassurance that the world isn't going to end, that we're not going to starve, and it will be okay. And then when I've calmed down and felt less emotional, I can then think about all the ways I'd want to change. So, summary from that, don't worry, it happens to the best of us, it happens to all of us. Look at different tap things that can help longer term. Have a look at what the big feelings are and whether you need some help with those. Do reassure, do contain, do give a hug, do try and be positive, show some empathy, and don't worry about that flipping of the lid, and just let that calming down time happen. So in summary, what we've looked at today is that we all have stress buckets. We fill them with big and small things, and they're different for each one of us. We have taps on the side that we need to make sure we're emptying, and we've talked about downloading the resources and looking at us as individuals and how we can open our taps and decrease our levels. We talked about positive touch. We've looked at pizza massagers. We've looked at what happens when you have a meltdown and the flipping your lid and the working with your limbic brain, and we talked about how you can manage those meltdowns by just containing those feelings, managing it and allowing that equilibrium back so that you can have a conversation much later on. So hopefully you'll find this useful. Please do download our sheets. If you have found it useful, please do consider whether you can make us a donation. We have donation buttons on our website, www.sitgap.org. Please do help us to keep giving some fantastic resources.